We're now live streaming.
Very good evening and welcome everyone to the first meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee in the new municipal year. My name is Daniel Markar and I'm the independent chair of the committee, which some might say is the most exciting of the borough. Tonight we have lots of new faces, so particularly warm welcome to all of our new members. And I will very shortly be asking everyone in the room, members and officers, to give a very short introduction, but we'll come to that after a little bit of housekeeping and etiquette. So we'll all be familiar with the fact that the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. So welcome to everyone viewing online, especially my mum, who never misses an episode. If you are here in the chamber this evening and you wish to speak, please raise your hand and wait for me to invite you to contribute. And I do ask that we speak with kindness, that we speak clearly, and that we speak very concisely. Projecting your voice into the chamber, the microphones are along the front, and that just ensures that the clerk and members of the public can hear us. Those of you joining us online this evening, please raise your virtual hand and we will monitor the screen for requests to speak. And as a courtesy, we ask that those joining remotely keep their camera on when addressing the committee, but officers may turn off their cameras until the agenda item that they are attending for is being considered. Please note that the Zoom chat function will not be used for questions or contributions this evening, but you can use it to communicate with the clerk. If there are any issues with the sound of the meeting online or within the room, please let us know. So whether you are joining remotely or here in person, all questions, including follow-up questions and, if permitted, supplementary questions, must be directed through myself as chair. And I would say that no question is a stupid question. So if you're thinking it, it's likely that someone else is thinking it, or one of our residents may also have that same question. I would also ask officers to ensure that their responses are put through myself as chair this evening. I want to take a moment to remind everyone that this committee is not a forum for party politics. It's an independent committee that is focused on our role in providing that independent oversight and assurance on governance, risk, control, audit, and financial reporting. And I'll try to keep us to that line at all times. So before we turn to the agenda, I would like everyone to introduce themselves briefly for the benefit of, well, all of us, particularly the public who may be watching this evening. So if you could please take your name and your role, and we'll begin at the front, we'll go through back, and then we'll come to the officers this way round. Is everyone okay with it?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Nate Higgins, Councillor for Stratford and Park and Chair of Council.
Hello, my name is Kelly Drake. I'm councillor for Maryland and also the chair of the Education, Children and Young People Swinton.
Dave Hunt, councillor for Glasgow South, the chair of Crime, Environment and Transport Committee.
Belmont Upgrade, councillor for Northern House.
And councillor Adjua Kwasi, councillor for West Ham.
Alexa Neely, independent member of Joanne.
Councillor John Wallace, member of this committee.
Councillor Mohammed Majid from Bournemouth.
Councillor Tahir Razak, politically for board, should be a subject of Sophia. As a chief as well.
Thank you. I actually sure corporate research.
Thanks.
Nicole Today,
Alison Chessel, interim chief audit executive.
Marie Mustafi, interim assistant chief exec and corporate director of resources, section 151.
Thank you.
Nick Sharp in a council.
Patsy, head of scrutiny and governance here at the
Manuel Hall, chief accountant.
Aktani, head of elections, democratic services and deputy monitoring officer. Sorry.
It's quite a list.
It's quite a list. Hello, I'm Jamie Berry. I'm the interim director of law and governance and the council's monitoring officer.
Neville Merton, interim head of finance.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I'm conscious that this evening some of the reports are to be discussed and approved, and I've therefore made a couple of amendments to the agenda. Firstly, we're moving item 15 after item 5, and then I'll be bringing forward item 11, which is the internal audit charter, and item 12, the internal audit plan, so that they will be considered ahead of item 10. This is to give us significant time to go through the questions, and I've allotted a longer time period to ask any questions which you might have. Two more things to add before we get cracking with the agenda. We will take a 10-minute adjournment at 9 p.m. to allow those who observe evening prayers to do so. And this evening, as it is our first meeting of the municipal year and we have a substantive agenda, ahead of every report, I'll be asking all officers to give a very top line overview of that report, 1 to 2 minutes. What is the report and why is it important? Not the contents of the report, if that's okay. Just to make sure that we are all on the same. Yes.
Perhaps on the open submission. Could we perhaps consider splitting the meeting into two?
That wouldn't be possible right now. I've allotted the time for the more substantial agendas. I've got items that I can defer to the next meeting. And we will have a follow-up meeting within the year. But now is not the right time to raise that, I'm afraid. We've started the meeting, Councillor. Thank you very much. So let's get cracking and turn to the agenda. So item 1 is the election of vice chair. So only voting members of the committee who are physically present may participate in the vote, although the candidate may be online, but I don't believe that to be the case this evening. So are there any nominations for vice chair?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate Councillor Kerry Gregg.
Councillor Drake. Thank you very much. And is there a seconder for Councillor Drake?
You can second yourself.
You'll second yourself. Thank you very much. Are there any other nominations for the vacancy of vice chair?
I actually nominate Councillor Mohammed Majid for that role, please.
I'll second that.
You'll second that, Councillor Clark. So we have 2 nominations. So all of those in favour of electing Councillor Drake, please raise your hand. And all those in favour of electing Councillor Majid, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. So the candidate with the most votes is elected, and therefore following the vote, Councillor Drake is duly elected as vice chair. Congratulations. Item 2 is apologies for absence and substitutes. So Councillor Natley and Councillor Tripp have both sent apologies, and Councillor Mercer is a substitute tonight. Are there any other apologies? Item 3 is in regards to declarations of interest. So to those members who are present physically, are there any disclosable declarations of interest this evening? Item 4 is in regards to the minutes of the last meeting. So this evening, members are requested to consider and agree the accuracy of the decisions and the minutes of the last meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee, which was held on the 11th of March 2026. However, as we have an entirely new committee membership and there were no members present at the last meeting, we are only able to note the minutes. So are the minutes noted? Show of hands or noted the show? Okay, they're noted. Thank you very much. So item 5 is the actions log. The committee is asked to note the contents of the actions log and the items dated for closure today. I will allow a couple of questions on this, but before I do, I have a question on this matter, which is we're being asked to close AC 298, but the log itself says that the information was not received. So does anyone have any more information on those housing void plans or why that wasn't sent?
I don't have any information.
No, so we won't be able to close that matter this evening.
No.
So that matter will remain open. Any questions? Yes.
A couple. So the AC 299 says due in October, but I don't think we're meeting in October. I'm just not sure about that. Then AC 300 says to close it because it's just for noting, but then I don't know how that will actually, what's the mechanism by which it actually happens. And then the remaining 2 don't have a date to be closed, and the target date is in the past. So I just
the 2 dates in the past, I believe, may be in error and have been closed. The item for October, we'll come on to it later, but we're looking to add a September meeting following our discussion as well. And the other item you referenced?
AC 300, it just says it's for noting, but what is given that it's the action is to ensure that particular accountable report in the future, you should have a note about how we relate to council tax arrears. Obviously, I wasn't in the meeting. It's a bit odd to say for noting and close it without saying what will actually happen. Is that in process?
Nick, I think AC 300 is from you. the action was for noting. I also was not at the March meeting. I don't know if you have any flavour on that for us. It's in regards to the County Board report.
Chair,
We might deal with that.
if I may,
Yeah.
in the updates that Nick provides in his reports, this information will be included. So where there is single person discount rule that has been identified that brings money back to collection in council tax, these arrears are reported as part of the report. So every report that he will produce, should there be a single person discount for all that means that we can collect council tax, he will identify in his report, should it arise. That's why it was, and the date previously, I think it's the date of the previous meeting. So it's been switched to today's
So
date.
yes, that we move forward that meeting from June. If there are no further questions, so to members present in the room, may I see by a show of hands as the report noted? Wonderful, thank you very much. We're now going to move ahead to item 15. And item 15 is the corporate risk management update. So I've allocated 10 minutes to this report. And whilst I'm taking the report as read, as I am with all reports this evening, I invite Ashwin to give a top line summary of the report, please, which will then be followed by members' questions.
Thank you, Chair. So in this report updates, strengthening standards. Since the last update, we introduced the standard, refreshed the strategic risk profile, and are now moving to implementation through certain developments to create the space. Turn the structure up. So we've got the framework established with the strategy and policy approved, the standards approved, to part of the design stage. So yeah, this is what we.
Thank you very much. So I'll now come to questions from members. If you could raise your hand if you intend on asking a question at this point. No questions? Yeah, no, that's fine. I'll give you a moment.
Are we being honest, just because this includes an appendix that has the different categories and the residual risk and stuff? Is it, do you want to question on that appendix, just on framework?
So what I'm asking for this evening is to note the progress in implementing that framework in and of itself. I'm asking you to note the current strategic risk profile and its progress, the planned rollout of the corporate minimum standards, and the next steps as outlined in the report. That's what I'm looking for you all to note this evening. Any questions?
I'm trying to, I'll be honest, I'm trying to find the page that I've got.
Actually, do you have the page reference from the pack? The page reference from the pack?
427?
Yes.
427. 427.
427.
Yes, I think my main question is in a number of areas, the residual risk is still very, very high. I don't see this as a new framework that's been quite recently, but is there, I would have thought that there would be action put in place to bring that, or proposed to be put in place to bring the risk down. Otherwise, we're just being told that there is still, incredibly high risk around things like health and safety, for example. That seems like an odd place to leave it, with like proposed actions to actually bring in the residual risk down. It seems above a manageable level.
So I think what you're looking at is the direction of travel.
Well, not the direction of travel directly, just you have the, what is it, the inherent risk, which, in some areas will be quite high, obviously. Residual risk is actually complied roles. In some areas, for example, health and safety, the residual risk is still like both high risk and high impact. And that's an odd place, or maybe medium or likely, so on. But that's in a very odd place to leave something like And it leaves me concerned.
Sure, so if we think about the top three risks, SR4, SR5, SR9, they're all the reason why they're being validated with risk covenants. So I think it's a clear articulation of the risk exposure, not so much that risks like SR9 is done. It's just clear articulation of better exposure in terms of with regard to you saying that has the highest risk, that's true. But that's all. Some of the right hand box, future implications have to be planned in the future to bring that.
Yes, that's it.
Looking at the SR1 in culture, I was really curious about your call 5, overarching culture does not support no platform. And so I was curious about that. Wondered whether there was something, perhaps I could read more about that, and what it was about. I don't know if this is an appropriate question for this committee or whether it's the right level of question, or but I was curious about what the work's being done to remedy that risk and what's the Workforce and Culture Board. I've not heard of that. So I'd be really interested in that because it seems absolutely key to everything.
Sure.
To me.
So these clauses have been formulated by risk owners and managers. That has one to it. So we try to do a direct link between the current controls and the drives of that risk to show that's risk. So even though I can't justify to do myself, I can show you the link how to link the risk.
I do think it's really important for us to know about that as councillors because it's about the culture, the overall culture of the whole organisation, and that's something that people talk to us a lot about. Talk to us a lot about the way that they feel they can either penetrate it or not, or have been heard or not, and you know, and as a new councillor, I'm very interested in the culture of the organisation and how we can, you know, develop that. It seems to be key. So you just said the regular CLs you were connecting calls 1 to 5 this bit. So what does CLB stand for? Okay, great.
Might I invite Maria to come in?
Thank you. That's super helpful.
I thought it might be helpful also to answer those risks are identified but aren't necessarily issues that we're dealing with today. There is a chance that something may emerge, and our job is to prevent the risk happening. That's the whole point, by identifying that it could be a really big problem, assessing it, and then doing everything that we can not to allow it to crystallise. In this particular case, it also correlates with our best value notice and the points around culture that was in there. We are doing everything we can to turn that around because we want a high performing culture to be the way we support our staff to deliver better, for instance.
Can we have some information about that? I'd be really interested in that, please.
Councillor Khan.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I hope you're not saying that this is a particular question, which is not, because it's regarding item 13 and 10, it's report, which is we are actually curious what's going to happen, given that the council is now no overall control.
Sorry, Councillor, can I just interrupt you for a moment? Are you still referring to the corporate risk management updates?
Well, it's page number 26, and I think it is.
No, we'll come to that just shortly. Can I actually hold that question for now?
No.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Can I go Joanne and then yourself, Councillor? Apologies.
I just wanted to, with this new risk management framework, you know, we were introduced to it the other month. How is it, and is there evidence that it's being consistently applied across the organisation?
So we've gone from a design stage back in March to now moving to the implementation stage. So at the moment we don't have any concrete metrics we can say that it's been implemented. And I think the output, you know, in a few months' time, once it's settled, is we have the right structures in place. So we've got directorate level registers, overarching everything, service area registers, project registers. At the moment, some areas have directorate registers, some don't have service registers. We're just trying to align everything to the standard. We can't say that it's been embedded, it's been
No, thank you.
Councillor Morris.
Thanks, Chair. This is my first meeting. How many questions am I allowed to ask?
It will be time dependent. There's a limit to 3 report.
Gotcha. So I will ask 2 questions really quickly. So first is about culture and culture change. We currently find culture changes are extraordinarily hard. You can come to this committee and describe that you want to change culture, but it also often involves buy-in by all stakeholders. I guess what we look at the practice, as a council delivered cultural change report, maybe things coming to describe how we achieve culture issue. The other question I have is in terms of housing regulatory compliance, specifically around hard silence. What is the legal exposure to the council if an incident happens on a job that you're meant to have done relatively good?
It's quite a lot to unpack there. I'll go for the first one, to the people and culture. So the risk is addressing that we fail to ensure. So that is the focus of the risk. Then we can look at people trying to see what's being done today and see what's being done in the future to ensure that culture does drive change in the culture. If we are looking at the controls and they're not effective or partially effective, it means these ways to try and promote that culture. But yeah, it's people and culture would be actually looking at this risk hard as a strategic risk.
If I can go back to the second part of your first question, and then I'll check on time. Could you just summarise your second question around housing?
Yes, so we obviously before judgment requires us to do significant upgrades to the national housing system, such as the fire certification, whatever that's called. We have identified a building that is not certified as a fire risk, and we need to upgrade in fire risk. Basically, if it was a fire on a block where we went to upgrade or check the safety standards of it, what type of legal exposure that exposes the council as a landlord is what I'm saying.
Chair, I'm not sure that's a relevant question for Ashwin to respond to because I don't think that features in the risk. I think what Councillor Morris is talking about is the legal exposure to the council is an impossible question to answer at the moment, because in order to give an opinion on that, as the chief legal officer for the council, you need to be in receipt of all of the facts around the incident, the scale, etc. So I don't think that is a question that we can answer in this committee.
Might I suggest that second question you can email through to me, and we'll endeavour for a response. And may I suggest to the committee that this evening we're looking to note the progress and next steps. Clearly, people and culture is something which is important, and I would ask the officers to provide a separate update on that in writing, if that's okay. Would that be
helpful?
To that point, I'm going to move on this evening, and I'm going to ask the committee, you're being recommended, or it is being recommended, to note the progress in implementing this revised framework. You're being asked to note the current strategic risk profile and the progress in developing and validating the strategic risk register and its associated bow tie risk cards. You're asked to note the planned rollout of the corporate minimum standards through the directorate management teams, and you're asked to note the next steps outlined within this report. So may I see by show of hands are the recommendations noted this evening? And therefore it's noted. Thank you very much. We're now going to move back within the agenda to item agenda point 6, which is page 21 in the larger pack. So hopefully we can find that. Item 6 is the assurance report, which was prepared by the interim monitoring officer. So I've allocated 10 minutes to this item, and whilst I'm taking it as read, as with all reports this evening, I will ask Jamie to provide a very short top-line summary over the document and its purpose, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's good practice for a monitoring officer to issue an assurance report, primarily for the purposes of this committee. And the purpose of my report is to support the council's annual governance statement. So I address information which does not typically appear in the annual governance statement. This is also a record of the role that I have in set out in the Constitution, and I've highlighted that paragraph 4 in the Constitution the aspects of the role that the council expects me to undertake. In respect of being the monitoring officer, I would just like to clarify I'm an independent person. I'm an interim employee of the council, but the interim status does not affect my ability to carry out my role. I'm required by law to be independent, and this report hopefully provides you with an assessment of my independent observations of the council. In my first 100 days, as I started the council in September, I prepared an initial report which appears at Appendix 3. And Chair, I'd just like to note, without going into content of the detail, that in my opinion, in my most recent report from paragraph 7, I do report that the council has started to make improvements around the governance framework. So as a result of that, I have a reasonable assurance at the moment, but I do believe that further work could be done to embed the governance arrangements that the council is putting into place. I'm happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm going to come to questions from members, and I'll start with
Thank you so much, Jenny. They were absolutely fantastic. My regarding number 13, given that the council is now a no overall control council, the monitoring officer and key governance bodies are reviewing the constitution to ensure it reflects the and promotes the new political position of the council. This includes reviewing key procedure rules and the scheme of delegation. My question is where we are on that, and the second question is you make note of a number of elections related complaints were received, and when necessary complaints were referred to the police for the solution. Where we are on that, and if you could just briefly tell us. And then my question is, you say that the arrangements for receipt and adjudication of postal votes was robust. We had numerous reports that a lot of people did not receive their postal votes in time, and at some towns they were not even able to vote on the 7th of May, unfortunately, and the postal votes actually was 30,000 votes in January or February, if I would correctly.
Thank you, I think the
15,000. So
the context of the postal votes is taken. I'm going to take the first two parts of your question. We'll come back to the third part if there is time. Otherwise, we'll ask for that response in writing. I just want to make sure that we get through questions.
Thank you, Chair. So in respect of paragraph 13, as the monitoring officer, I'm a custodian of the council's constitution. I've already taken my role very seriously and started to draft elements which I believe need amending. I will be contacting the chair around the process for a review of the constitution, but in my responsibility is to prepare draft amendments to the constitution and then consult with members. So I've already taken quite significant steps as I've been here. I do a constant review of the constitution. I don't just leave it alone for 12 months. It is daily. If I brought my printed copy of the constitution here, you would see it looks more like a graffiti book because I've written all over it. There's post-it notes all over it, etc. But I have already started the redraft of the key documents that I think are a priority, and I will intend to consider that with the chair going forward. In respect of the elections process, the council does need to be careful. The elections are run by the returning officer who sits outside of the council's corporate body. I was the deputy returning officer, and it's important for me to give confidence to the electorate and residents of the borough about the arrangements that the returning officer put in place because it's such a significant event for the council. The observations that I undertook as the deputy returning officer, and also in my capacity as the monitoring officer, were that I was given free access to all of the arrangements. I was consulted. In respect of the postal votes and the arrangements for the receipt and the adjudication, I personally oversaw the receipt of postal votes, the opening of postal votes, the adjudication process, without interfering with my colleagues' roles. The returning officer and as the monitoring officer in the council, we are not authorised to consider complaints that come in, but where we do have complaints, we are required to refer those to the Metropolitan Police. And I would like to confirm to this committee that such actions were taken, and the returning officer had personal oversight of all of the complaints that were received. I am satisfied that the council has delivered a safe, robust election, and if anybody has got concerns about the election, they should have raised those with the Metropolitan Police, and we did raise that at the time. That anybody with an elections concern was free to do that.
Thank you. We're going to leave that. Thank you. Councillor Cotton, please.
Thanks, Jamie, for your report. Paragraph 39, you spoke about the corporate leadership team has pioneered a renewed focus on the response times to members' inquiries and complaints. And I just wanted to understand whether there was also work going alongside that as to the quality of the response to complaints as well as members' inquiries. Because obviously, if one is doing something quickly and the response that's given is actually not to withstand it, then that must not undermine that work. So if you
Yes.
just understand officers' thoughts on that. And I also had a second question, but I'm happy to.
We go with that question, and on this occasion, I'll come back to the second because we had two questions within one previously.
So, council, yes, there is a robust machinery that happens around the reporting. So, corporate leadership board does have a very active involvement, and also is contacted where there are areas of concern or it is deemed that responses may be deficient. So, before they're circulated, the CLB does have an active role. The corporate leadership board, does have an active role. As aside from that, myself and Maria, we do have regular oversight around the process, and we ensure that our colleagues in that area are supported. And I'm also mindful that we are required to respond within 10 days. So we don't have any leeway on that, but we do ensure that where there is outstanding information, people should be kept updated and appraised of that. But it is ongoing. I believe that in my report, this is one of the areas that is more embedded than other areas because of the corporate leadership board oversight and that team approach around addressing the significant backlog of concerns. If I may, Maria may want to add to this.
So we took a focused approach back in December to actually clear the energy items and then work to ensure that every item is responded to on time. So there shouldn't be a deficiency once we receive. We've got 10 working days, or in FOI it's concerned, we've got 20 working days. I think the important thing is that they go out on time. And my vision, and this is how I've been working as a corporate leadership board, is that we answer them as they come in. We don't wait until the deadline or the deadline starts to answer them. And this way we're responding and showing respect to our members and to our residents when requests come in. If there are deficiencies in the response, for whatever reason, a complaint comes in and they're unhappy with the response, there is an escalation process, but there is also our ability to understand, to go back to the team, rectify that. But through the complaints process, we're hearing about things we need to change for the better in terms of delivering our services. And that's a really important thing for us to do. Any private, any public company is actively listening to the complaints to ensure that they're making streamlining things, fixing things so that the complaints are not repeated. So we also have to focus on the type of complaints that come in. There is a separate report which is coming in that focus on complaints, which I think will be helpful.
Your second part of your question.
And then my second question was on paragraph 45 in your report. You talk about there being an increase in audit days, an expanded audit plan is being proposed. But you also mention at the paragraph above that you have a concern about the visibility and recognition of internal audit, and that greater understanding of the role and support internal audit can offer to the council needs to be understood and embedded. It would be useful to understand, in your words, if that work has started, who you're liaising with to improve on that, because it felt almost a bit open-ended.
Yes. Chair, I'm pleased to say that this work has started. I see Alison's appointment as the Chief Audit Executive as a major milestone, a step forward of being a very visible advocate on behalf of internal audit and the purpose that internal audit can offer the council. There has been a strong commitment from what is known as the Golden Triangle, which is the Chief Executive, the Monitoring Officer and the Section 151 around the role, purpose and visibility of internal audit. And because of I think it's fair to say, the collective concerns, though I aired my concerns in December as my first 100 days. And then I'm very pleased to say, as a result of that, Alison's appointment has occurred. There's been additional funding put into internal audit. There's been an expanded internal audit plan, which I think is fundamental to help the organisation in terms of the key internal controls. And also, I just want to add to this as well. I think we're starting to see greater recognition of internal audit by the Audit and Governance Committee, and that's set out by some of the documents that appear on this evening's agenda. I'm comforted by the role of the Chief Audit Executive having a much more one-to-one support to the Chair of Audit Committee as well, which is what should happen as part of the 3 lines of defence model in the audit and in the governance and assurance framework. So I still think there is a way to go, and I think there is greater work. I'm looking forward to working with Maria when she's the Chief Executive from next week, in terms of how we can ensure that the further embedding of internal audit can be taken forward, so that I can report at a point when the chair would like me to, in terms of the progress. But I think there's work to do, but there's definitely been progress since December.
Thanks so much. Councillor Morris.
Thank you. So you mentioned. So, I guess my question is very succinct about it. Is in terms of standards among members, it requires specific. So requiring standards among the members requires internal party discipline, which is neither consistent nor can be quite short at times. So I guess my question would be to you, would be, as we look at the constitution, is there an opportunity to strengthen it to improve the standards of the members of this committee?
Okay, do you mean sorry, Chair, do you mean in terms of the code of conduct and the protocols that we have in place? Or do you mean in terms of the role that committee members in this committee have?
Sure.
Both. Okay. So in respect, Chair, if I may, in respect of the Standards Committee, the Council has taken major steps forward in terms of the refresh of the Standards Committee, the greater understanding of the Code of Conduct and the associated protocols that go with that. Most importantly for me, the Member Officer Protocol, which that has been reviewed by in the previous administration, has now been adopted into our constitution. So that I'm pleased to say that that has been updated. That is fundamental to delivering a positive culture for the council, and it shows mutual respect between officers and councillors, which should exist at all times. The Standards Committee is also taking a much more visible and much more active role as well in its responsibilities in terms of the oversight of the mandatory member development programme, the wider member development programme, the introduction of the Members Hub, which is on everybody's laptop. Well, it's not on mine, but it's on every member's laptop, so that you've got 24/7 access to frequently asked questions, points, tips, help, what is best value notice, for example, and so you can access that at any time. So I'm very pleased with the progress that the Standards Committee has made. We've also, if you don't mind me, Chair, saying the Chair of the Audit and Governance Committee has now met with the Chair of the Standards Committee, and those meetings are regular. And I think that's appropriate because the two chairs with responsibility for the ethical governance of the council and the corporate governance of the council now have a good dialogue in terms of sharing their opinions, sharing their information they've heard and what they think will be best for the council. In terms of this committee, I was very disappointed when I first arrived because the attendance historically at this committee was poor. I think the understanding of this committee and the role and purpose of it was lacking. This is an assurance committee, it's not a scrutiny committee. And I think there wasn't a good understanding of what assurance actually means and what the role of this committee means. I took, as I've indicated in my reports, I took the time to speak with the former vice chair of the audit committee and explored with him about the understanding of working with the chief audit executive, the understanding of the 3 lines of defence model, the understanding of attendance, the understanding of assurance, and the role that this committee can have in ensuring that the council has robust governance framework, displays a positive culture, what its interaction is with the Standards Committee and other committees. And I was quite disappointed to learn that that wasn't really happening. However, I think in my response to the previous question, I think Alison's appointment, I think a stronger commitment by the Golden Triangle and in the wider context from the Corporate Leadership Board, has really put effort into ensuring that members of this committee now have a training programme, for example. There's been mandatory training around being involved in this committee. The engagement between the Standards Committee and the Audit Committee should continue. And also I'm making, I think, which has been unusual for this committee as well, is the monitoring officer being present on a continuous basis. This committee is to ensure that myself and my colleague statutory officers are doing the job which we are supposed to be doing. And so I believe that there are major inroads and steps forward which are improving the ethical and corporate governance of the council. And the fact that you're all here this evening as well is huge, because this shows that the importance that you are taking of this committee. Finally, Chair, we have a new chair, we have new independent persons as well, who offer a different insight as well. So whilst they're not voting, they do stand in the shoes of experienced auditors, but also importantly, members of the public. So they are, sorry, Chair, but you are here to hold us to account as officers and as members as well. I'm also mindful that our colleagues from External Audit are present today. They give a separate view, and it's important around the annual governance statement, their assessments on value for money, that we are able to demonstrate robust and positive cultures and governance frameworks. So.
Thank you very much. And I would add to that, I'm working with the Chief Audit Executive and the Interim Monitoring Officer on a programme of training for everybody. And we're looking at actions such as beginning a closed session for members in advance of every single meeting, so that we can get together and go through the reports and ensure there is ample time for that analysis. And I would certainly second the point about attendance. It's a particularly full house tonight. I think we've got enough people here today for 2 football teams, which is great. In the interest of time, I'm going to come to Councillor Higgins and then Alexa, and that'll be our last questions on this item this evening.
That's not a minded question.
If it's a build, I would take that.
It was just exactly on that point, just to say to provide council further assurance. Newham has taken further steps than many other councils in the country in terms of the recruitment of the chairman of an independent chair for audit. It is very unusual what many councils in the country have done that, and the recruitment of 2 other independent members. I'm working with lots of local authorities that have not made this steps, so evidence of good progress.
Thank you very much, I appreciate that. And Councillor Higgins, do you want to take the last question on this section?
Question about constitution, question about internal audit. So, just on internal audit and assurance. So, I think you're saying you've got reasonable assurance about governance, but I think one of the other reports we have further down from Alison says limited assurance. So I just wanted to tease out what are the different things you're looking at to reach a different opinion. Maybe you just have a different opinion about the same thing, but it would help us to understand that. There's a point about internal audit and the fact it's currently contracted out, and I wanted your opinion about whether that is good for governance or not. And then just on the reviewing the constitution point, part of your role, I believe, is updating the constitution in response to decisions made by council. Council decided to not hold these full council meetings, but we've not had an update to the constitution yet. In response to that, it still says that we're supposed to have them. So just where's the status of that decision?
If I may, again, in the interest of time, if you may come back in terms of the differing opinion, so we can have a bit of context around that, and I may ask you to come in as well, and then talk around outsourcing internal audit. And I think the interim monitoring officer did mention that there is ongoing work on the constitution, so I may refer that to writing, if that's okay. Just in the interest of time, Councillor.
So, Chair, thank you. So I think it's quite healthy that Alison and I have got a completely different opinion, to be honest, because I'm a slightly further stage on the governance process, but I also have a much broader remit and probably a less legalistic technical overview. So mine is much more global, and it's based on things I've observed rather than being informed by numerous reports, numerous specialist opinions given, etc. So mine is a much broader one. But this also is my personal opinion as the monitoring officer, and it shows my independence. So when I reference that this is what the Constitution sets out that I'm supposed to do at the beginning of my report, I think it's paragraph 11, not 11, paragraph 4, that mine is a global overview. And so I've assessed, in my view, based on 13 years experience as a monitoring officer, 5 years before that as a deputy monitoring officer, a significant number of decades as a senior officer in council, what does my version of good look like and what am I satisfied with? Because if I'm not satisfied with something, I do have to formally consult with the Golden Triangles, which is the Section 151 officer and the chief executive, around whether there are concerns around the decision-making framework or concerns about actions that the council may or may not be taking. And so I definitely have a different assessment framework, and some of this is my personal opinion and from the observations that I've seen. But I've used my benchmark of the December report, which is my first 100 days, very uneducated about Newham, knew very little about the organisation, really explored the council and wrote my opinion. So I've based it on the improvements that I've seen, and whether as well, it's really important whether my colleague officers actually listen to the advice I give, the opinions, because why have a monitoring officer if no one's going to listen to the advice that I give? So it's quite a broad ranging kind of approach that I take, and bearing in mind the Constitution. In respect of internal audit, for me, in my professional opinion, as long as there is a visible internal audit function, I don't mind whether it's outsourced or whether it's in-house. I think the decision about whether it should be internalised or not is not with me. I think that rests with the Section 151 officer, whose primary responsibility is to have oversight of internal audit in conjunction with the chief audit executive. But for me, it's the scope of the internal audit plan, the capacity of the internal audit plan, and the involvement of the chair of the audit committee in oversight, and then the wider committee in delivery against the plan and ensuring it's a living document that remains relevant to the council and addresses issues as they arise, and also offers learning. It's not about scrutinising in that gotcha moment. This is also about practice improvement. And so for me, I don't really mind whether it's outsourced or it's in-house, but I leave that decision for the Section 151, whose professional opinion it would be around that decision.
Thank you, thanks, Chair. So the internal audit opinion is a requirement of the global standards and CIP code, and it's a professional judgment based on the internal control environment and the risk management environment. So it's a much narrower view based on and other information for the authority. But in terms of where we are in risk management and internal controls and a number of audits, hence my opinion introduction. But in terms of your question, which I think is a great question, mine is a backward-looking view about how other controls within the internal control environment and risk management environment in Newham, and that's how I've concluded my question.
I think we can explore it. There's 4 internal audit reports on here that demonstrates that internal audit is definitely visible to this committee. So when we get to each of the reports, we'll touch back to your question.
The point of constitution is noted. The interim monitoring officer has said that they'll be writing to me about it, and I'll hear your response as well. So we're being asked to just note the content this evening, so if we can move that to us. So therefore, the recommendation this evening is that members of the committee are being asked to note the contents of the report. So may I see a show of hands if the recommendations are noted? They are noted. Thank you very much. So moving on to item 7, which is the draft statements of accounts.
Chair, just want to highlight that a number of the lights in our daisy chain are not working. So the external auditors may need your help repeating some of the questions not necessarily here. So I just wanted to bring your attention to that.
Thank you very much. So particularly aim your voice at the microphone, please. Project even louder than you might do usually. Thank you. So this is a draft statement of accounts. I've allocated 30 minutes for this report. As with all other reports, I'm taking this as read. Item 7, so we've
Page 53.
And allocated 30 minutes. Whilst taking it as read, I'll invite an officer to provide us with a short summary of the report, which will be followed by members' questions.
Okay, thank you, Chair. It's good practice to bring the draft statement of accounts to the committee so members are familiar with it prior to it being submitted for audit. The accounts are by its nature a very long document and does take some digesting even for those of us who are experienced and look at it on a regular basis. And it's basically backward looking in terms of the actual statement of where we are at the end of the year. The narrative report at the start is should be sort of indicating some forward-looking items, but it is at that shot in time as at the 31st of March 2026. We will, obviously then the accounts will be subject to audit by colleagues from EY, and they plan to have the audit signed off by the end of November this year. The backstop date is actually the 31st of January, but they would like to get it completed sooner, so we can get used to coming forwards from the processes that the government have put in place to bring in local government audits back to a national timetable. Last year we received a disclaimed opinion. In some ways that's a neutral opinion. They couldn't form an opinion because they didn't have time to audit everything. We are working to get through everything this year and an audit completed, and then build back assurance so that in a couple of years that we can actually get back to a unqualified opinion. But it takes time, and we are putting processes in place within finance to work towards that.
Any other officers want to comment? Question. Thank you. So members' questions. Raise your hands. That's what I'm saying.
So my first question relates to note 21, which is the receivables table. It's on
131, I think. Page 131, Chair.
131.
So one of the line items is to do with amounts due from subsidiaries and how that is 296 million. And so those relate to amounts owed by subsidiaries. And then when I was also looking at it, I believe Populo owes around 245 million to the council. It would be wonderful if you could explain how, and then also the next row across shows the impairment amounts, and that's noted as negligible. It would be useful to understand how that assessment was made, how it was deemed that that principle would be fully recovered, and when that was last reviewed.
Actually, we are currently reviewing the loans expected credit losses, so we will have that in time for the audit. So these figures may change in light of that. But yeah, that is basically that's what we've got on the books as the company's owing us. But we are doing work on to see is that correct that we haven't got an ECL or expected credit loss for them. So,
and as part of that review, will there be a risk assessment on the fact that the council is in some way supporting, how should I say, that the position is supported by letters of support, funding and converting debt into equity? So when we're looking at the impairment allowance, do we also take that into account?
I think there's a wider piece of work going on with the companies which the section Maria may wish to come in on.
There's a separate item on the agenda, supplementary papers that actually makes clear what the loan exposure and equity exposure is for each of the companies, particularly those split out while the other groups. So we do have that part of the treasury management. So it's important that the companies their debt to us, and it's important that the companies service their debt to us and pay, including interest and principal, in how we've structured the payment schemes. We are reviewing with our companies, and reviewing 5 at the moment, and we will work our way through the rest. But it's important that we have up-to-date information from them. We're clear, but the council you didn't say letter of comfort, but you're looking for where the council is stepping in to provide that comfort to the companies. It's important for me as Section 151 officer that our companies are buying to, and that's an incredibly important point. So we've got a number of companies that we're reviewing to test viability amongst other things, and then we will understand the options around the companies more widely. And we don't really want to be in a position where we are having to support our companies.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I also have a question.
Might I go through the cycle and then I will come back to you.
This might fall under the category of questions, but like in terms of where we are at the moment, is this draft statement of accounts? There's all kind, you know, there's the key performance indicators that are all kinds of different policy areas that I'm concerned about and would like to ask about, but I don't really know if, you know, it's not a scrutiny committee, but I just don't, is it about the accuracy of them, is it the way they've been prepared, or many of us are not auditors like professionals, so it's just something that no kind of question is useful at this point.
You're right to ask that question. So we include our performance indicators as part of the rounded view of the council for the previous year. Some local authorities do it in summary, but there will be a report that will be going into the public domain through scrutiny and cabinet that will enable that to be discussed in more detail. This is a completeness in terms of the picture of the council. When you look at the financial statements, you also have performance information for the balance.
The financial.
Before I go to that, I think Alexa has a build to the answer.
Correct me if I'm monitoring officer, but in the audit committee, I'm not actually required to take a statement of accounts to audit committee, but we do it as good practice. So in terms of answering the question, it isn't like we have a requirement as members to necessarily scrutinise quote unquote the accounts. The officers are bringing it as good practice for the sake of when we hear the audit opinion by reading the context of the account.
I'll come back to Maria before your question.
You're absolutely right, and lots of councils no longer do this because they used to present them before they were being signed, before date section 151 officer had to sign them to present them to the external auditors. The meaningful discussion will happen when the external audit has completed and the external auditors are giving you their reports on whether these are right or wrong. And then you can see if there have been adjustments, if there have been issues, if we've progressed in the right direction, if we've addressed some of the issues that they've raised previously, because that's the direction of travel. And the external auditors will be articulating whether our direction of travel means that they've also rebuilt the assurance that they need from the reset that was done by government to the recovery position.
I'm appreciating the discussion, so I'm running out of lecture and that build, if that's okay.
Just to add that, the officers can't really say this as an independent member, but you're right to question what I think are the meaningful questions we really ask as members, especially to draft accounts, because we are limited in our visibility of other accounts that we've prepared at this point. They're draft in nature. Maria's right. The true test of our effectiveness as a committee will be once we get the external audit opinion, and then we can meaningfully engage with what external audit summation is of the accounts, and then what we think of that summation.
And the question order, is it a follow-up?
It's good. I need to know which of my questions.
Sure, okay, then please.
Yes, so the main question I end up with is just significant under delivery on the capital programme, and I feel like it doesn't really get into why, but it's hundreds of millions of pounds slippage in the programme, and I feel like we could do with knowing more about that.
So it's a good question. We've had an outcome report that went to June cabinet, where that will be discussed in detail. It is included here. You're absolutely right. It's got too much slippage, and the profile of the capital programme needs to be appropriate. I did say when we set the budget in February this year that we've reprofiled the capital programme, but it will need further reprofile and review as we go through the years. In 26-27, that's exactly what we're going to do, because I think the financial profile is in some cases too ambitious, which leads to slippage, because budget managers or programme managers are not thinking about the capital programme spanning multiple years as a totality. They think of it as an annualised budget like the revenue budget, and it's completely different. As accountants, we have to understand whether the funding will be available in future years, limitations like grants, or whether the revenue cost of borrowing is appropriately budgeted for in the appropriate year in terms of financial strategy. But fundamentally, we must think of capital over spanning multiple years. We can accelerate if we move quickly, and we can slip if we're not moving as quickly in terms of delivery. But quite often the financial profile is always accelerated against the project delivery milestones. It's something that we need to work on. It's something that every organisation seems to have as an issue, to be fair. But we will be working on it this year.
In fact, just to say, I'm particularly concerned in regards to the HRA because of the C4 judgment. We know how much work we need to do to understand. One of the indicators about is also decent homes as well. So in that area in particular, if there's the money is available, it's also going into the surplus. That represents not delivering as much as we could do or in theory, the finances make available to deliver.
So there are, I think they're quarterly reports that the team present to cabinet and go through scrutiny in terms of the progress that's been made on the work to come out of the C4 judgment. That for me is a significant priority as chief executive. It's important that our residents are safe in their homes and we're doing everything that we can to do that. And we are working with the housing regulator to improve our journey. That is one of my areas of focus when I take over as chief executive, continuing to be the chief executive who has had that area of focus in his life.
And the order of questions is Councillor Khan, Councillor Morris, Councillor Drew.
So, thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for ensuring us that there will be some training provided to the members because I have a background in finance. I know the terminology, manager status and everything, but there are members that know some stuff. So that I think it would be very helpful to provide and the comment the external audit is for the last 3 years. I think we ran on the disclaimer report saying that the external auditors could not obtain sufficient reliable evidence to form an opinion within financial statements, so we're free from material statement. It's good to know that now that would be happening in November from Ernst & Young. So that is
yeah. Okay. Andrew Ward, Director of Finance Management. So at the end of November, we expect the audit work will conclude. There's an item later on the agenda about the audit plan, so I won't say more about that. But our expectation, I think, officers will be there'll still be a disclaimed opinion for these 25-26 accounts. What the biggest barrier to that really is the opening statements. Again, you may hear more, certainly more about this from colleagues online a bit later, but the opening balances, without being able to confirm them, it's very difficult to really sort of confirm the closing balances, which after all those you see before you hear. So it's about the process of building back assurance. There's a lot to say about why so many councils are in the boat that we are with disclaimed opinions. Accounting and audit capacity is some part of that. There's probably too much to say, so I'll leave it there. But, I just wanted to
just look forward to that report.
Thank you. And Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chair. Can I refer my fellow members to page 72, please? First of all, Chair, if I may, there's a specific role regarding abandonment complaints up and abandonment at 30%. I'm assuming that is a bad target, but I don't know whether to determine whether that's so and will announce that it's tracked. My question will be that the report says that we are now going to a much more stable financial position. And in fact, this table shows that by council purchase are targets. But I think any other part of that role suggests that operationally we are actually quite bad, specifically about the first month contact. So forgive me, Chair, this is out of scope, but can I ask what actions are being taken to ensure that these indicators come into annual review?
There's a report that goes to Cabinet that identifies the path to green. I'll point you to that. And there will be a report coming this autumn so that you can see that. What I would say in terms of the council tax collected, we can see that we have moved up the table compared to other London boroughs, albeit we're at 92.5%, and what was built into the budget was 92%, so we did exceed that. I want to see that higher. The team are very, very clear about that, and they're putting in the work to ensure that we collect the debt that's owed to the council. The calls, the the safe run complaints and the member inquiries, we've touched on those. These are the average over the entire year. If you look at the last 3 months, there were increased performance because we did the focus work since December. Again, there is a report for Cabinet that has that detail in it. To the point about the ombudsman complaints or any other ones that tracked, I'm going to be changing how we report that so we can see have we improved or not improved based on last year, even if it's tracked, because some of them don't. It's not appropriate to have a target. It's not acceptable to have a target against it, but it's important to know whether we've done better than the previous years or worse. So if performance has deteriorated. So that will be changing how we report during the year. So that will become more visible.
Councillor Drake, please.
My point was about the training, going back to what Jamie talked about, really, just very curious to ensure that we as new members here are adequately trained and also actually the backstory. Yes. I'm curious about the backstory. I don't know the backstory enough. That would really help me to understand the why working field is about to happen. And be able to ask the right questions and for this committee to work really well. So I don't know how you're developing that training programme, but
so if I may,
if you could explain.
Working alongside standards, the chief executive, the interim monitoring officer, to put together a programme of training. Obviously, with new members joining the council, there's been a large body of training that's had to take place, and it wouldn't have been appropriate given the allocation of committees to have done that any sooner in that plan. So it's something we're going to be working across for the next couple of months for the next meeting. So aside from what I mentioned earlier about the desire to have a closed session for members ahead of each meeting, we can come together. We're also discussing other opportunities to come together for training. We do have a forward plan of all the reports that will come to us, which will allow us to have that foresight of what's coming and what may be beneficial to do that. So
can we feed in?
Absolutely, I'd love to take your feedback. So please, that's an open invite to everyone to send me an email. You should have received the email I sent earlier in the week. So any specific requests, please send to me and I'll chat with colleagues. Thank you very much. And Alexa and Joanne, please.
It's not necessarily a question, Chair, but I just want it sort of on the record noting. In relation, I was speaking about in relation to the previous point that we made about our role as committee members and the importance, in noting the accounts and the importance of external audits report in enabling us to discharge our responsibilities. It is important to recognise that our ability is constrained by the successive disclaimed audit opinions, because if we continue to lack assurance over the opening balances, this limits our ability to claim that we do have assurance over the accounts. I sort of want to say that to sort of urge EY to do everything in their power to rebuild that assurance so that the committee can perform its statutory role.
Noted. I won't come to officers on that one, but
yeah, I just wondered if officers could provide some assurance. I mean, obviously we've moved new EFS position recently into one of the direct council that is not now in EFS. I wondered if I could have some assurance just around that, because suddenly we've got reasonable amount of reserves. Is there any risks that the committee should be aware of from that move in that position? Is there anything sitting underneath that perhaps we need to just be aware of in the future?
Yes, so in the budget setting report, I was very clear about in section 25 statement, but also in the cover report, the number of risks that we are carrying as an organisation that we need to ensure that we mitigate or we don't enable them to crystallise. So part of there's a long list from pressures in our top 3 big spending areas that are demand driven, temporary accommodation, adult social care, children's social care, as well as the economic climate, interest rates, inflation rates, contract failure risk, risks to our companies. There's a long list of them, and they're in the report. I'm more than happy to recirculate my section 25 statement, it would be helpful to you. But one of the fundamental things that the council has done that has given me the assurance to be able to give it to you is that we set a balanced budget without the requirement of exceptional financial support And that was a clear move forward. There was about 56 million pounds worth of new savings that were in the budget for 26-27, as well as their funding was more favourable to this council. It recognised the deprivation that this council has faced, and that helped. We couldn't have balanced without both. One or the other wouldn't have helped us. It was imperative that both came to fruition. And now and as part of reprioritising reserves and moving monies that were in earmarked reserves, earmarked for different purposes, and moving into the general fund balance to demonstrate that I've created a 3-line of defence in how we're managing our budgets. The first line of defence is services must take their pressures or any forecast overspends with their own actions. Second, 10 million in contingency was created within the budget to enable any unforeseen things that couldn't be managed by services to be managed as a one within the budget. And the third line of defence is our business risk reserve, newly created business risk reserve, with reserves that have been moved into it to deal with any other business risks that may emerge. There are, of course, other earmarked reserves that we could go to before the final safety net of the council, which is the general fund balance, which has been set out and will track to be set at the equivalent of 10% of the net revenue budget. And I think that is sufficient. Now, some local authorities can be less. I wouldn't advise it because, and my advice to all members, including if we end up going into that, you know that there is a signal that the council is in financial difficulty long before anybody says anything. That general fund balance must not be touched. It's not for spending. And it's important that we deliver all of our savings to time value and profile. It's important that we manage risks, and we've had the risk management report about how do we manage control our risks so that they do not come to fruition and have financial consequences. But it's going to take action every day. I think we're one of the few councils in the country that balance 3 years of our medium-term financial strategy. I haven't seen that in a very long time. We have a 5-year medium-term financial strategy, and in July we refreshed the medium-term financial strategy. The current year and the 2 first years in that medium-term financial strategy remain balanced, and there's a new 5th year. So we all know the framework that we're operating within. We all know what we need to aim to do so that we can ensure that it remains financially resilient and sustainable. And a key factor in that is having actions to manage demand, taking action as a council, and not just letting the do nothing option be what drives us.
Councillor Quaten, for our final question on this item.
So thank you, Marie. You mentioned there about the unallocated general fund, and when I was looking into it, it looks as though a lot of the increase to that fund is by releasing funds that were earmarked for other reserves. Could you explain to us what those other reserves were for, and why we think now that we don't necessarily need those funds specifically earmarked there? And then just an additional point on insurances, I noticed that obviously you joined us in January, and you mentioned that I think a substantial portion of the financial year you weren't within this role, and that you were relying on certain assurances. Could you provide us on some more comments about the assurances that you relied on, and any sort of additional work that you might need to do to?
So it's probably very important that you know that my entire background is in finance. I've been a Section 151 officer or a Section 73 officer, sometimes at the same time, for 10 years. So over 10 years. So for me, this is my area of expertise. However, when setting the budget in February, I cannot place any reliance on anybody else's work. It is my personal and professional responsibility to recommend that the budget is robust to full council, and it's incumbent on me to go through the budget and ensure that I am comfortable with it. That meant that the poor finance team did 4 months and 4 weeks. That's what was necessary in order to get to the position we needed to be. So I could write a Section 25 statement on the robustness of the estimates and the adequacy of reserves, and through that is a long Section 25 statement, but it articulates a reflection on the work that was carried out during the year in terms of Bob's work, and also the expectation, what I expect to be happening as we move forward, and who is responsible for managing budgets and what is the expectation of those budget managers so that we can move forward. But I don't place reliance on anybody else's work. It's important that it's my professional and personal responsibility to full council.
So for the reasons set out in the report and its appendices, the committee is recommended to note and comment on the draft statement of accounts and its submission for external audit, and to note and comment on the draft annual governance statement 25-26, which is included within the draft statement of accounts 25-26. So may I see by show of hands the recommendations noted?
I was trying to earn a question about the insurances.
Sorry.
Earmark.
Yes. Oh, the earmark reserves. Apologies. There's an earmark reserves note that I was looking for.
No,
The site wasn't able to find it. The important thing is, not only had we made budgetary contributions to reserves built into the budget, so that we could put them up, I reviewed all of the earmark reserves so that I could assess, do we require all of these reasons, and what do I see as the risk that would lead me to store up a particular financial amount against that risk. I would like the business risk reserve to be higher. I would like to put more into that and track that and higher amount so we can see any more business risk that we can go to it. But I made the judgment that we would not finance capital expenditure using revenue earmark reserves, because I do not think that is a good use of revenue budget. You use reserves once and it's gone. I wouldn't finance capital in that way. You use capital receipts, grants, Section 106, seal or borrowing. And therefore have been able to release money. I also reviewed the collection fund where we are tracking our performance and we're not seeing that deficit come through in the way that might have been the case post-COVID, when some of the tax bases and collection funds weren't recovering in that sort of way.
The detailed reserve note is on page 116.
And you can see the transfers in. So the reserves that have got the transfers in, thank you for my assistance, it's helpful. So you can see where we've actually moved money into from the current year's budget, as well as the transfers between earmark reserves within that note.
Thank you very much. So may I see by show of hands the recommendations noted for this item this evening? Okay, they are noted. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 9, which is Treasury Management 25-26, the outturn report. I've allocated 10 minutes to this report.
Sorry, Chair. I think item 8.
Oh, sorry.
External
The pages are set up together. It's apologies. So, or maybe I was gunning ahead. So item 8 is the external annual audit plan 25-26. So I've allocated 20 minutes to this report while I'm taking it as read. I would invite our external auditors to give a very top line summary so we may understand the importance of the document and what it means.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. I think an introduction would be a good start. So I'm Simon Mathers. I'm the partner in charge for the 25-26 audit of the council, joined by Karen. Here she is, who is the senior manager working on the audit. So the report that you've got in front of you, starting on page 247 of your papers, is our audit planning report for the 25-26 financial year. So that sets out the work we intend to do to be able to give an opinion on the financial statements that you've just considered, report by exception on the council's value for money arrangements if there is a need to do so, and discharge our other audit responsibilities. One of those is around the annual governance statement and its consistency with our understanding. There's been some discussion on this already in the committee, but the context for the audit of the financial statement very much remains the ongoing work to rebuild assurance following the reset nationally. So this is not something that's specific to the council, the reset of the local audit regime through the issue of disclaimed audit reports, allowing a catch-up process. So for new members of the committee, we did issue a disclaimed opinion on the financial statements in 24-25. That was following the issue of disclaimed opinions in 22-23 and 23-24. As set out on page 252 of your papers, page 6 of our report, this year we have undertaken a detailed risk assessment to evaluate the risk of material misstatements on opening reserve balances where we did not have assurance at the 1st of April 2025, and then to assess management's preparedness to support historic rebuild of assurance. I think at Newham, given the number of years of disclaimers and the fact that we, for the last 2 years, have not been able to complete planned procedures, it's unlikely that we will do much rebuild work this year. However, it's really, really important, and this I think is a reasonable aspiration, that we deliver all of our planned procedures. And to the comment that was just made, kind of what assurance can you take from a disclaimed opinion? I think if we can get to a position this year where we have delivered all of our planned procedures and can report back to you against that, that will give the committee a far greater level of assurance than has been the case over the last 3 years. To support us in that, it's essential that good support is provided by management to the audit. So last year in our audit results report, we set out a qualitative assessment of factors impacting execution of the audit. That's repeated in this planning report on pages 288 and 289 of your pack. So you will see there are kind of a mixture of effective arrangements that require some improvement and arrangements that require improvement. To support progress to allow us to deliver all planned procedures this year, it's therefore really important that there's a continued focus from the council to address those areas that require improvement. In Appendix D of the report, which starts on page 295 of the committee pack, we set out recommendations, or repeat the recommendations that we raised last year, designed to engender that improvement. I would say that we've got a really good, positive and complete set of responses to those recommendations from management, and there's been a bit of discussion, hasn't there, about what's the role of this committee. So I think it's a really important role of the committee to hold officers to account in the delivery of those recommendations. If they can be addressed, we can move forward on this rebuild journey. I think we do have a good and constructive relationship, and I do think progress was made last year. So we are hopefully on an upward trajectory. I'll pass over to Karen, who's going to briefly walk you through the risks impacting the financial statements audit and then the risks that we've identified on value for money.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Simon. So basically on page 254 to 256 are the key audit areas and risks that we have for 25-26. The key risk basically remains broadly consistent with the previous years and reflect those areas of the accounts that are subject to the degree of estimation, judgment, uncertainty, or susceptibility to fraud or error. And in terms of fraud, we have identified 2 fraud risks. The first one relates to the presumed risk of management override of control. So this is a standard and general risk that we have in every audit, being like management is in a position to override controls. The second fraud risk relates to a specific revenue recognition, which is revenue expenditure, which is the risk that revenue expenditure may be incorrectly classified as capital expenditure. Other areas of risk relates actually to the property valuation, but the level of risk as a significant or inherent risk depends on the valuation methodology that has been applied to the valuation of the assets. So it depends on if it's an existing use value or fair value, it has a significant risk, while for the depreciated replacement cost and council dwellings, the risk is lower. So we have it as a higher inherent risk. And then we also identified other inherent risks in relation to the recoverability of the loans to the subsidiaries, the pension liabilities and list accounting, reflecting the degree of estimation and judgment involved in these areas. Bank reconciliation still remains a key risk following the audit errors that we have identified in previous years, while the EFS support requires appropriate disclosure in the accounts and the need to ensure that the disclosure are complete and accurate. If I move on to page 257 of the agenda pack. So this basically relates to the materiality levels or thresholds that we use in every audit. So we don't really like test every single centavo in the account. So our overall materiality threshold is set at 24.4 million, while any items or adjustments or audit differences that are above 1.2 million are being reported to management and to the committee. finally, on page 58, basically these are related to the value of arrangements that we have. So we have completed our risk assessment for 25-26. And at this stage, we have identified 4 risk of significant weakness in the council's arrangement. So these are a continuous monitoring of the previous risk that we have from prior year relating to the financial sustainability and governance in relation to the housing services, governance on the financial reporting process, and also the governance of the subsidiaries. We will continue to assess these areas throughout our audit and provide our conclusions in our annual audit report and audit results report. And now I'll get back to you on Simon to take through on the audit timeline and his other inputs.
Thank you, Karen. So we'll keep this brief because we've touched on it already, but the timeline for this year's audit is set out on the graphic on page 284 of your papers. So as has been said, the statutory backstop by which time we have to have completed our work has moved forward by a month this year from the end of February. So it now sits at the 31st of January 2027. However, we do want to finish earlier. So we want to have all work completed by the end of November and to have issued all of our reports by the end of the calendar year. That puts us in a good place for the following year when the statutory backstop comes forward to the end of November. I think we'll stop there and we'll take questions. Just to reiterate the point that was made earlier, it's difficult for us to hear everything that members are saying because of the issue with the mics, but we will do our best.
Thank you, Simon. I'll repeat the questions if necessary for you.
Thank you.
Before I go to questions, do any of the officers in the room wish to add anything to this item? No.
I think, can I just go in terms of the backstop states? In the 2015 accounts and audit regs, they brought forward the audit of the accounts to the 30th of September, which I think caused the problems in the first place. Audits weren't getting completed, which built up the backlogs that people were taking several years to have their audits completed. Hence, two years ago, the government introduced these backstops. So we've gone from different dates, and sort of this year is the 31st of January. Last year it was the 28th of February.
And as a Section 151 officer, I would prefer that the external audit were able to audit all of our accounts, and we weren't in this position. But this is the way that government worked with the external auditors and local authorities to find a way of resetting the system. So we've moved back to assurance. And I think in the external audit report that accompanied the accounts, I think back in February, March, there was a long list from external audit showing the colour coding of the RAG rating of where they have started to rebuild assurance and where they still need to do work to rebuild assurance. And in Appendix A, the work that's there is the work that came out of the last external audit. The team, our team, need to perform better. So that is not, we don't see reds in that space. We see greens.
Thank you very much. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, well, thank you, Simon and Aaron, for a brief presentation. The risk assessment, you are saying that financial sustainability, the council plans and manages its resources to ensure it can continue to deliver its services. My question is, had it not for the EFS and the fair funding review, do you think it would have been impossible for the financial sustainability risk to be kind of deleted, or what do you think?
So I think I caught all of that. So in the absence of EFS, will that risk remain? Was that essentially a summary of the question? Yeah. So we'll assess the updated medium-term financial strategy, the robustness of the work that's done to underpin it, and therefore the reasonableness of the council's financial plan. So you heard from Maria around the balance that's been obtained. This time you heard from Maria that there were various things that were necessary to allow the council to get to the position that it's got to. I can't prejudge my work. I can't tell you now whether there will be a risk in that area because we've not yet done work to fully address address that risk. But certainly we will be looking at the changed financial position and outlook for the council and reporting back on that in our audit results report.
Joanne.
Yeah. So just on page 261, I just would like you talk at the very end about concluding that the procedures about evaluating risk include inappropriate capitalisation of revenue expenditure. Can you just expand on that? I just wondered why it was in a sort of little, not in a bullet point as part of that list.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's any significance in the particular way that it's been presented, but certainly I can explain why we consider the inappropriate capitalisation of revenue expenditure to be a fraud risk in the majority of council accounts that we audit. So councils are universally under pressure financially, and that pressure is primarily on the revenue budget. There are capital funding sources that the council cannot use to finance revenue expenditure. It also can't borrow to finance revenue expenditure. It can only borrow to finance capital spend. So we think there is a risk, given the financial pressure that's faced, that the council inappropriately seek to charge revenue costs to capital financing sources. So what do? We look at the amounts that have been capitalised in the period. So we look at your property, plant and equipment additions, your investment property additions, and we test them to a much higher level of detail. We also look for unusual things like journals transferring from revenue to capital codes that we don't expect. So that's why that appears in the plan as a fraud risk. In terms of how it's presented there at the end, not as a bullet, it's just a reference to the next risk in the plan.
Thanks, Chair. In your report, you identified addressing like previous recommendations as an issue, that there remains previous recommendations open. I think we see the same with internal audits. There are many unaddressed recommendations. I was wondering if this might be appropriate for you to offer an opinion on. I'm not sure, but if there's a sense of benchmarking against other councils that you audit, whether we're particularly problematic on doing that. And also whether this is what you mean when you say that council's progress is behind the expected timescales on the like rebuilding assurance. Maybe that's a different point, but I didn't know if that was connected. I appreciate the council will want to come in on the point about addressing audit recommendations. We're seeing it both external and internal audit. I wondered if you had an opinion about why this might be.
So taking those points in turn then, on recommendations, yes, it's really important that recommendations are addressed. The number of recommendations, so there are a relatively high number of recommendations in this report. As I said in the presentation, I do think the responses, there are a good set of well thought through management responses there. So it's really important that they are now delivered on. And your role as a committee, it's your role as the body charged with governance for the purposes of auditing standards at the council to make sure that you feel management is taking appropriate action to address those recommendations. So at the end of the audit, we will come to you again and we will tell you whether we think those recommendations were addressed or not and what else needs to be done. And I think it's for you to then hold officers to account to deliver against those things. In terms of the timeline for rebuild, so at Newham, we've not been able to complete all planned procedures in 22-23, 23-24 and 24-25. At some other authorities, we have in 23-24 and 24-25. Those authorities are therefore further back on the rebuild timeline, if you want. So they're further progressed. So again, when I was presenting, I think the important point here at Newham in 25-26 is that we can complete all of our planned procedures. I think that would be a massive step forward. It would offer you more assurance as a committee, and it would be the starting point for that rebuild journey.
Thank you, Simon. Does anyone want to come in?
So I think I completely agree with Simon, and the team are aware of this. So obviously the last external audit was concluded in February, and the recommendations are available to us. We as a team, we need to ensure that they are fully implemented. If there are recommendations made, there's a reason for the recommendation being made, and we must take those steps. Now, what the external auditors will need to comment on is whether they've seen that in the work that they're auditing. Given that some of the recommendations were available to us in February or in draft reports slightly earlier, there may not be enough traction. I'm not at this stage prejudging, but my expectation is that the team do everything they do to demonstrate that things are in place. And whatever we need to do to assure our auditors, we will provide that evidence accordingly, and they will pass that judgment. And it will be reported back to you and you'll hold us to account. I know that there's an action in the action log that we provide you with the quarterly update and progress, which we will ensure that we.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cotton.
Just to add on to the point that Councillor Higgins made.
Councillor, so just speak a little louder and much.
Just to add on to the point that Councillor Higgins made, it would be great to hear from the senior officers and obviously the partners at EY to understand what exactly is working differently this time round, so that we can feel assured that it will move differently. Because it's really encouraging to hear that everybody is working, is hyper focused on this and moving forward. But it would be useful to hear a comparison between last year and this year. Is it the appointment of Alison? If you could have like a practical understanding.
Alison's not her items brilliant, yes.
Yeah. It's with Maria, it'd be useful to understand the practical changes rather than just the general.
Perfect. Simon, if I come to you first, then I'll come to the team in the room.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got an established team. We've got good continuity in the team. We've got a good relationship with finance. The proof will be in the pudding. So we need to do the audit. And, at that point, I can tell you whether those things have generated successful change or not. One point I would make is that the council did publish its financial statements on time. So there is a deadline to publish the financial statements of the 30th of June. The council met that deadline. That means that we can start the work on time. The financial statements there was some refinement to do, I think, but the financial statements were broadly complete at that point. So we have a complete set of financial statements to audit at commencement of the audit. Those things are positive. I'm not going to give the committee an assurance that it's all going to be better because I just don't know. So we need to do the audit, and we need to see where we get to. But if we can get through all planned procedures this year, that will be a really good step in the right direction. Karen, did you want to come in?
Yes, Simon, thank you for that. And I think also the how we measure it is in our audit results report, we have the level of assurance that we have from the previous years and also comparison for this year. So if we make all of those accounts as green, then I think we are in the better direction.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we'll be making them all green this year, but you should.
Except for the reserve.
So, Maria's referred to it. The summary of assurances, if we can see progress there in terms of the level of assurance by account area, that will be a real positive, I would suggest.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Maynard and then Andrew, please.
I think if we've brought extra people in who are experienced, who've certainly pushing through improvement in working papers. We are going through reviewing working papers, making sure that they do meet, or certainly a much better standard. I'll never say they meet the auditor standard because there'll be something they'll find that we never get to. But we're trying to make a step change improvement, and we're just sort of focusing on getting everything as well as we can.
We'll come to Andrew and then Alexa will close us out on the subject.
Thank you. I'm at risk of repeating points. It's really good that we got our draft statements out by the end of June. Let's jump in first for that like that. So I'm really pleased about that. We've invested in the team. So we have more people at all levels working on this, which means more hands on deck. We need more reviewing of working papers, etc. In fact, we were able to get our draft statements published at the autumn's end of June, and as you saw in the audit plan, it starts. There is work on the moment, of course, but it starts in January and September. We've got a lovely period of more senior numbers from working papers. Working papers are going to be really key because they enable Simon, Karen, and their team to well, I would hope, and I see this, quickly work through and gain assurance on what we've put in the accounts. And the quicker they can do that, of course, they can move on to the next thing. And you heard, we weren't able to cover everything into this audit. So that's where we think. I will also say, you know, where we've seen the gaps or need, we've basically reached out, we've outsourced certain functions in the preparation of the accounts. So some preparation on the collection fund, for example, but also some really expert advice on things like expected credit loss and things like that. So we haven't scrimped, actually.
Thank you very much. And then I left the closing comments.
A lot of the guys have been addressed by Andrew there, but I was just thinking typically in like, I don't really see some of the reviews, but like typically it will be like a bit of give from both sides of the auditors and the council to say, we'll invest in capacity, for example, in the finance team to produce better quality working papers to result in less questions from excellent audit during the process, and then equally, like I'm sure people have made investments into their audit teams to ensure that they have the capacity and capability to effectively.
Thank you very much. So for the reasons that have been set out in the report, I'm asking the committee this evening to note the contents of the report and its recommendations in regards to the level of assurance provided by the plan. So may I see by show of hands the recommendation noted? Perfect. It's noted. Thank you very much. Item 9 is the Treasury Management 25-26 outturn report. I've allocated 10 minutes excuse me, to this item. I'm taking it as read. However, I am going to ask officers to provide us with a very short summary before referring to questions. Who will take it?
Thank you, Chair. Me again. So a very short summary. This is a report on our Treasury Management performance back in 25-26. Treasury Management, in Treasury you are managing borrowing and also investments. We don't have a lot of investments in we and where we do, you know, they are kept very simple in terms of investments, but there is considerable borrowing in Newham. That's borrowing that's been taken on over the years to make investments. I think we've covered that in some audit committees, albeit I'm sure many of you are new to this as well. That's split between the general fund and HRA, and the numbers are in there. We borrow according to the prudential borrowing framework. And so Appendix 1 in the report goes through the prudential indicators. So they are set and aligned to the budget that you set for that year. So that's how they're derived. And we're working well within, in some cases, Councillor Higgins, that links to the point on capital slippage actually. So we haven't borrowed as much, anywhere near as much as we would have originally set out in those budgeted figures for the year, because we haven't we haven't delivered on the capital to the extent that the original budget was set. And Appendix 2 would be the internal investments to the subsidiaries, so that links again to some of the questions I've heard earlier.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the this evening?
It's just a point about investment. You say we don't really invest in you. See, we have reserves of different kinds. The numbers that are referenced as like even as cash in bank is much smaller than our reserves. So it's what we're actually doing with the cash is not being spent, it's not invested.
It is being invested. I think what Andrew was trying to say is that we don't do any complex investments. So it's within the Treasury Management strategy parameters, but other banks, other local authorities we may lend to.
Action Treasury.
Sorry, can you say that again?
So Her Majesty's Treasury, which usually overnight we do deposits with them, as well as other local authorities. And
complex investments, I think is what Andrew was referring to.
And then each year the complex investment would be
all sorts of complex deals.
There was that previous one in like 90, like there was people putting investments.
Oh no.
Bank last year. So it resulted in a landmark case for like local authority borrowing investment.
So the through you, Chair, absolutely right. Through you, Chair, what I would say is we set the treasury management strategy that sets the parameters that we can operate, and we cannot operate outside of those parameters. Should the local authority operate outside of the parameters, we must report back to you and let you know. And fundamentally, that's how we drive what we can do, what I can authorise behind the scenes in terms of the operation. So I know that I've got particular limits that we can invest up to or borrow up to, and we will take out the appropriate borrowing at the appropriate time, so that we're not, for example, if interest rates are high, you might wait for it to come down a bit. If we know they're about to climb, you might cash in now, and so on. So those are the parameters. This is a report to let you know that how we performed against those parameters. And I would urge members to ignore one of the appendices and see the supplementary appendix on Appendix 2, which is the loans. There was an error in the one that was published originally.
So just on that strategy, is that a cabinet decision, or is that who decides?
Treasury management goes to full council, so this report is going to make.
But I mean more the strategy rather than
It's full council, so it goes all the way to full council through audit and governance, scrutiny, cabinet and full council.
So this evening, the committee are asked to note the Treasury Management Outturn 25-26, including the final position and the prudential indicators as in Appendix 1. So may I see by show of hands the recommendations noted? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They are noted. Thank you very much. As indicated earlier, I'm moving to item 11 within the agenda, ahead of item 10. So item 11 is the audit charter and mandate. And I'm conscious that we have enough time to do this before we take a short adjournment, which will be fine. So the audit charter and mandate, I've allocated 10 minutes for this report. I am taking it as read, but I am going to invite Alison to give a short summary in the document, what it is, the importance of the document, and then I'll take questions.
Thank you, Chair. The audit charter and mandate is a required document for the authority. This update is a good practice for the committee to see and understand and read and approve the mandate every year. Obviously, this is the first week to start the year, so we think it's time to bring. And the minor changes this year really are around and that's really it. Be honest, there's more, and it's more that it's a statutory document that we need approved that shows the scope and the work of internal audit.
We're being asked to approve this evening. I'll come to Joanna first. Sorry, did you raise your hand after it? No.
I just wondered, we recently had an EQA where they interviewed. Yeah. Was that included in this, or is that a sort of separate? Did it any reference?
Well, the EQA identified that we need to bring the internal audit charter to this committee, which we were intending to do anyway, so moving forward plan. The EQA again referenced the changes in the appointments, and the EQA report is referenced in my internal opinion and the outcome of that. So that was it.
That's it again.
Chair, the 4.3 point about the reporting structure for the head of audit, and the guidance to forget exactly what that example says that they should report this to the chief executive, but we have to report to the 1.1 officer. And then similarly, there's a point further down about potential conflict of interest with the head of internal audit also being responsible for procurement. Appreciate it's slightly a question for you to answer, but I'm just like it begs the question, right? Like why are we doing that, and why is that an acceptable level of risk?
Do you want to take this question?
Yes. So as currently said in section 151, so I will say to you, it's not unusual for the chief audit executive to report in terms of paying rations into a variety of different places in the organisation. However, they have direct access to the chief exec, and they have direct access to section 151 officer. Now, as chief executive, one of the things that I want to monitor on a regular basis is the outstanding high risk recommendations, where I would expect Alison, who is already doing this at corporate leadership board, reporting there, but also reporting to me on a monthly basis as part of our statutory officers group, where the chief executive, section 151% meet on a monthly basis, or in addition to as and when necessary. So Alison has direct access to, I'm currently serving chief executive, and when I am chief executive next week, she will have direct access to me. So paying rations can be somewhere, but she has direct access.
So sorry, so why is the guidance concerned about whether they report to the chief executive or not, if it's so? Because what you said sounded very reasonable, but I don't understand why the guidance would say otherwise.
I think if we rewind in this organisation about a year ago and the monitoring officer's report, the lack of visibility of internal audit in the organisation is something that I think the guidance is seeking to rectify. Now, I think that we are doing that now quite visibly in the organisation, and we have a corporate governance board internally as well that meets on governance issues. So for me, we are elevating internal audit in all of the spaces that it absolutely needs to be. And they are actually being invited in to do proactive reviews as well as assurance pieces. So I would say to you, the investment that we're making, both financial in the ability to undertake more internal audits through a strategic audit partner, as well as our one internal resource, it's important for us that Alison is visible and her opinion is taken on board. It's about that gravitas of opinion, the respect that the internal chief audit executive is given.
The global internal audit standard covers all companies. It's not specifically a public sector guide. It's not like the code around guide. So it covers all types of organisations, financial institutions. And I think in a bigger organisation, absolutely, the perfect situation would be a completely separate internal audit team that doesn't lead with the finance team, mainly because, as you know, internal audit controls are, checking the work, in effect, of the finance team. So this standard is the sort of absolute gold standard for all internal organisations, not just public sector organisations. So I think that's an important point. And Maria said that different organisations set up, but the important point really is having clear access to all the key senior officers and the committee and the chair. But yes, that is why really the absolute gold standard would be a totally independent team that doesn't report into the director of finance, as it were.
The two roles between potential conflict. Open to Maria.
I was just going to say, we do have a completely separate strategic partner, or two strategic partners that are delivering our internal audits for us, but they do not work in the organisation. So I think we're demonstrating separation in organisation in every way we're operating, in how we're delivering that.
So therefore, this evening, I'm asking the committee to approve the audit charter and mandate. So may I see by a show of hands all those in favour of the recommendation? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The recommendations are therefore agreed. We're now going to move on to item 12. We may get only to the point of asking an officer to give us a summary before we take a short judgment. So item 12 is the audit plan for 2026-2027. I've allocated 10 minutes to this report. I'm taking it as read, but I'm going to invite Alison once again to give us a short summary of the report, followed by questions. And please be mindful that I'll be taking it at 9 o'clock sharp.
Thank you, Chair. So this report covers the annual plan for 26-27, and it's taken into account a lot of information that we sought from other reports, such as the CPC report and the Housing Regulators report, and that has then had an influence on how we've created the plan. We've also relied on the strategic risk register, identifying what's the strategic risks are. The plan has actually expanded considerably compared to last year in terms of number of audits and the number of days, in order to address everything that's been discussed during this meeting. So unless I'd like to offer legal sentences for questions, that's my hand.
Any questions from members on this item? Councillor Porter.
So, in the opinions that we've obviously come to talking about, the chief audit officer found us to have limited assurance. And from my read of that, to Councillor Higgins' point from earlier, some of that was driven by the fact that the organisation has kind of failed to complete agreed plans. Could you help us understand how this audit plan for the next year touches on this sort of gap?
Well, we follow up all of the audit recommendations from the prior year. And that's an update is included in one of the other reports, the audit experience report. And that will continue to be reported. Also to on a monthly basis, but also to CLB as well. And also to the meeting that Alison will be having to chair. So that way we can really increase focus on the implementation of recommendations. And then as we identify new recommendations for new work, that will then be built into that review process.
Yes, can you assure us that this audit plan has been sort of linked and aligned with the highest strategic risks that we're facing, you know, so think about the sustainability, financial sustainability, so how do that?
So the plan at the back has a detailed outline of the audits, and it at the last column it details where that then maps to the strategic risks that the council faces. You find that we made sure we attempted to address all of the strategic risks. Some that have a lot more focus, such as financial sustainability, but we are focusing in each of those.
If it's a brief question, I'm just got on the agenda.
I don't mind doing it.
If you start the question, we can.
Yeah, it's just about similar following on from that. I'm surprised that there isn't anything in here about like FOI, member inquiry, statement complaint stuff that responsibility, because the KPIs that we've seen show that it's quite poor, and that it feels like a perennial issue. Like, you know, starting my second term, it feels like an issue throughout the whole of the first term. We really has made significant progress, but we're still, that KPI is still 50% for the inquiries. I'm surprised that isn't actually on the take and the risk that represents the council.
We focus the audit plan on the strategic risks, so we're covering the 3 high strategic risk areas.
I understand that, but I didn't get my chance to say in that agenda item. I was surprised that this governance strategic risk is seen as medium instead of higher. I wanted to ask that within the time, so it's connected to that. I'm not convinced that that is on a medium level.
Okay, there's risks around complaints.
Complaints, local government ombudsman, is there information which are involved in freedom of information? I'm not sure, but
there is always contingency within every plan, so we have an ability to flex and put extra audits in throughout the year. And we are looking at other areas of risk interest, but I think we are focusing on the control environment and the key control environment within the plan as our priority for this year.
With that, I'm going to take a 10-minute adjournment. The members who wish to take evening prayers may do so. I'll be starting at 10 minutes past 9 sharply, and we may treat you all to some lights turning back on.
Those less ladies quickly.
You're right.
Yes, everyone said.
I mean, it's not genuine fact about the.
If you could take it, it's because we're going to be starting very shortly again.
Is it? Somewhere, do you want some?
Sorry?
You missed items.
Yeah, we're coming back to it. I pulled the approvals forward,
Oh, I see.
so we had more to discuss. Right, thank you very much. So we're now back from our adjournment as we were discussing item 12, which is the audit plan 26-27. Were there any further questions following the officers' discussions? Yes, Councillor Higgins, and that'll be the final question on this point.
I might have been really dumb, but it says that we're supposed to be considering the budget and resource plan as part of this, but there's no budget details in this report at all. I don't know if I'm missing something.
The resource plan is the number of days, the number of audits.
But budget, there's
Through you, Chair, it's delivered within the budget that has been set. So we added another 300,000 as part of the budget that was set in February. New financial year. So we put an additional investment. As you get to the remainder of Alison's report, you'll see that while we've almost trebled the number of audits that have been undertaken, excluding schools, from 12 to I think there's 33 that are in the new audit plan. It's significantly increased. We need to assess whether that is forward, whether we need to increase it further, and resource appeal.
Yeah, thanks. I will come in with Councillor Morris if you did want to have a question. You're not said that, great, thank you very much. Right, so therefore this evening I'm asking members of the Audit and Governance Committee to approve the interim audit plan, its budget and resource plan for 26-27, as has been set out in the paper from officers. So may I see by a show of hands all those in favour of the recommendation? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, thank you. The recommendations. Oh, sorry. All those against? Thank you very much. And all those abstaining? Great. The recommendations are agreed. I'll now return to the reports for noting and move you back to item 10, which is the internal audit progress report to the 31st of March 2026. And before I come to officers, does anyone have the quick reference of a number for item 10?
365.
365. So within the report, there are a number of high-risk overdue actions, which are being reported monthly to the CLB, the Corporate Leadership Board, with progress and implementation updates. Having spoken with officers, I've requested that the progress reports are shared with me on a monthly basis, and that if any items are not progressing towards the target implementation date, then the head of that service or the director will attend the audit committee in person to provide updates and an action plan at the request of myself and the chief audit executive. This evening I've allocated 10 minutes to this item. I'm taking it as read, but I'm going to invite Alison or Nicole, Alison, to give us a short summary of the report and why it's important, please.
So this is a standing item on the agenda. Every quarter, every meeting, we have an update on the internal audit plan that's been delivered, the actions and recommendations that have been implemented, and a summary of the outstanding audit recommendations and plans going forward. So this is a core item for the committee to be familiar with. The information is hopefully quite clear and laid out in a simple way. Just to note that if there are any limited assurance reports issued in full during the period, those will come in full to the committee going forward. Any questions on?
Great. Yes, Councillor Majid.
this. Is 368, which should be the thing, which is that. What are the conditions?
Could you repeat the page number, please?
368. Possibly the number of 57, 61.3 person.
The full detail of the overdue items are in the appendix B. And this report, in fact, with this explained appendix has been to corporate leadership board 2 weeks ago, on the request of and myself to highlight the high number of outstanding recommendations, because that came with my opinion, and we've asked each director to provide an update or implement in the next quarter.
Does that answer your question? Oh, sorry, Maria, and then Jenny.
Through you, Chair, I think it's really important that we've just cleared a report that is identifying a number of audits that are undertaken. We don't send internal audit into places in the organisation that we know to be facts. We want to send internal audit in to give us an area that we may not know that's got high risks or that we haven't covered for a period of time. So when we know that there are issues, to give us that assurance. There will be recommendations that come out of the reports, and they may not all be substantial or reasonable assurance. They may be limited or no assurance, nil assurance. And it's of course important to be reasonable and substantial assurance, that if they're not, it's important that where there are high risk recommendations, or recommendations, but in particular high risk recommendations, they are implemented as soon as possible. So during the audit, when members of staff are told that there is a high risk recommendation that's come from an internal control weakness, they should start to implement to do them. They don't have to wait until the report's been issued and have 3 months afterwards. I think in this case, you're seeing a large number of recommendations that haven't moved in months. We have raised the profile of this organisation, and everyone understands the urgency of implementing these. We've also heard the chair say that will be brought here to explain their progress and be held accountable. But if these recommendations were implemented in a timely fashion, and then we demonstrate a good audit maturity in the organisation and an internal audit environment, internal control environment, that may lead to a different audit opinion from Alison, even if there were lots of audits that were no risk, limited assurance. So it demonstrates the correctness of the internal control environment, which clearly here we're not. So this needs to be addressed forward with high priority release.
Thank you.
Very quickly, Chair, I echo what Maria has just said. I think this also demonstrates the lack of embeddedness of internal audit across the organisation historically, which I think in previous reports, I've expressed my concern about the lack of visibility of internal audit and the lack of understanding around the importance it plays for the organisation. So I think this is fairly historic as well, that we're now tackling to address with the revised culture and the revised attitude towards internal audit across the organisation. So I'm hopeful that this number will reduce quite dramatically, and I'm hopeful going forward that this will be an outlier going forward, and it will be much lower overdue response, if not zero. And if it is, it'll be by exception only. So I think this is symptomatic of issues that this committee has already heard about earlier in the meeting, Chair.
Thank you very much. Joanne?
In here we've got appendix A about the use of AI technology, which I thought was really good forward thinking. I don't think, linking it back to the conversation we had a couple of minutes ago, that it's in the new audit plan, and yet the technology moves quite fast. That's just an observation. But I suppose what is the process to ensure that all the lessons are learnt? Is there something you can assure us that lessons are learnt, once you've done?
I think we're developing that process in line with the risk process. So we're working towards a position where internal audit and risk are sort of two sides of the same situation, that they go into a certain, look at this identified we get independent assurance on whether those controls are working, and then we mitigate the risk. So I will be looking at the digital space and risks at the moment, which is a result of one of these audits and our risk work, because a lot of our risks are identified around GDPR governance data risks, not physical risks. We're also reviewing that. And again, as I explained, that with the new professional view on risk, we're going to get a different position on risks. Everyone's using the same scoring. It's going to be a little bit, a few sort of bumps in the road in terms of we're using a standardised methodology to rate our risks for projects. We've got a standardised new escalation on risk as well. So yes, I would like those lessons to be learned. At the moment, I can't really give any assurance, to be honest, around specific lessons. And I'd like to think that each service lead and director would be reviewing the implementations and embedding the improvements in the control environment. But us centrally, they're not really there. So.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Higgins, Councillor Drake, and that'll be the final. Oh, okay, perfect. Councillor Drake.
It's a question for contextualisation, possibly to Maria. What I'm picking up is sort of there was a lot of this, and now we're going to do this, and we're developing all of these new things. I would really value a contextualised position, a story, if you like. I'd really value just a short story of kind of what's going on then. What does this mean for us as new councillors coming into an organisation? Because I'm picking up all sorts of things, and it'd be nice to have that conceptualised in one place.
Fine. So I can't comment on how things happened before, but what I can tell you is how I would expect this to happen in the future. It's important that internal audit and internal control environment gives us that robustness check about how we're operating as an organisation. It also minimises the ability for fraud to occur in the organisation or errors to occur. Good services that lead to our essence. It's about systems and processes and governance. We focus quite a lot around where we deal with money and our systems and manual intervention, so that we have those assurances that things are working. If I look at what you can see in front of you in this report, where you can't see the recommendations that have been made and implemented, it tells me that we needed to elevate internal audit in the organisation and the value it is bringing to the organisation, so that services could see that when they come in and they find things that need to fix and to change, that it's advice to them to do because it will help them in the long term. And even if, for example, I don't know, we need to implement a new system, might be the recommendation because the current system doesn't work in the way it needs to. That might be a futuristic thing that you can't do in 3 months. Absolutely change your working practices to strengthen the internal control environment so that management and I have assurance. Section 151 of this about internal control environment is robust. You have those assurances that things are operating exactly the way they should, because that's what this tests. Where we've got systems and processes, are we following them? Do we have the right ones? Is there management override of control, where a manager is telling someone to do something that actually shouldn't be done in that way? It's all of those assurances. We've expanded the plans that reflect strategic risks and strategic risk register, which also directed the new plan to be where we are concerned and where things haven't been touched. For example, key financial systems, as far as I'm concerned, they should be done every year. And we are changing our approach to internal audit. That does mean that you will see the recommendations of what I want to see. This is what we've committed to, is that we will implement time action. And if they don't, they will be held to account on a monthly basis at our board, internal board, we've got governance board, we've got you as audit and governance, and with the chair, because if they're not implemented, it still tells us that whatever the operations are, they're not working at their optimum. So that's what we want this organisation to be. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. It kind of connects a bit also with what Councillor Higgins was saying about members' inquiries.
Great.
Having the same kinds of things keep coming up and up and up and up. And whether those trends being tracked and tracked back through the processes, not just financial, but also performance, etc.
I may change it very short. we may have, if all internal audit do not go into areas to give assurance, we may have areas where staff believe that they're doing the right thing, but they may not be. And this is the external check that helps. It also does mean that we would also use internal audit to do proactive work. So where we're implementing something new, to look at how we're implementing that new thing. And then later on, different auditors to come and do an assurance piece that's independent.
Right, thank you. Councillor Khan for the final question on this item.
Yeah, quick one. Given that we've had issues and problems in the past, and then obviously just said that you can't comment, you know, obviously in charge as the new chief executive of London Borough of Newham, are you satisfied with the good controls in place going forward?
No, the internal audit opinion is limited assurance, so I'm definitely not satisfied, and that's why we've got an expanded audit plan. That's why I recommended that we needed additional internal audit resources, put 300,000 in. It may need to be more in the future, because I want to ensure that we've got that coverage that we need, that tells us that we are well organised, well run organisation. Our internal control environment is strong. I want to minimise any actions that shouldn't be happening, and I want to strengthen that so that we all have that assurance. That plays into our annual governance statement and plays into all of our governance frameworks. So it's incredibly important that we do this well.
Thank you. The key assurance for me, and then I hope that you all take assurance from as well, is the new cadence of a monthly report of each progress on each item. That will then allow us, with our meeting cadence and the proposed sessions beforehand, to make sure that key risks and things that are slipping can then be a focus within these meetings. So with all of that said and done, I would be asking all members this evening to note the context of the content of the report. So may I see by a show of hands the recommendations noted? They're noted. Thank you very much. At this time, under Rule 8.2, I'm interrupting proceedings because we are approaching 9:30 p.m. As business is not yet concluded, I will now take a vote on whether the meeting will continue. So all those in favour of continuing the meeting beyond 9:30 p.m, please raise your hands. 10 p.m, sorry, it's just 30 minutes. Yeah. All those against? Any abstentions? No, great. So the meeting will continue for no longer than 30 minutes. Great, thank you very much. So now moving on to, just making sure I've not missed anything. Item 13, the Head of Internal Audit's annual report and opinion for 2025-2026. We have 10 minutes for this report, and I'm going to invite Alison to give a short summary of the report, followed by members' questions.
Chair, as you mentioned, every audit head of internal audit must give an opinion annually. We retrospectively do that for the past year. As identified in the report, it's a professional judgment based on the audit work completed, any other regulatory or external assurance quality assessments that I feel relevant, and then I've listed one that you can do account of on taking the LJP review. I base the opinion on the number of outstanding high-risk actions that are currently outstanding, and the number and scope of the audits undertaken during the past year, of which 19 were undertaken and 8 were limited assurance and 7 was assurance before substantial assurance. Within the assessment of this report, I've also identified that we've undertaken the external quality assessment, which is a requirement for every internal audit provider to undertake within 5 years. We undertaken that. It's an internal assessment of our internal audit from a peer review. That's been undertaken. We were graded if we were agreed with partially performed. That shows that we partially perform with the global internal audit standard, again, which is a global international standard. It's not a single standard. But we have undertaken it, and that we are currently working up an action plan with a view to us to be fully performed by November next year. So that's the internal audit team as well, and quite a lot of those actions are around the effectiveness committee, the improvement meeting for the team, and the additional scope of the audits. So I'm very comfortable with my opinion as senior leadership team and corporate leadership board and local section. So any questions on the opinion?
Councillor Higgins.
Sorry. I wondered about the interaction between this and the governance statement and the statement of accounts, which I haven't got the exact wording in front of me, but it basically says that we're satisfied with the council. But you obviously have identified lots of issues, and actually the management identified some issues in her view as well. I'm surprised that doesn't feed into the governance statement more strongly. I wondered what the connection is between those.
Any thoughts? Yes, please. Priya.
No, you go first.
Jenny.
So, Chair, Councillor, I think that's a fair observation, but I think we do need to be mindful that the annual governance statement is still draft. And so that is a living document and is subject to numerous updates and reviews as and when the governance profile of the council changes, or how we as a council, as a corporate entity, react and change and review our governance framework. I think my response is, and my opinion is my personal and professional opinion, and Alison's is different. It's set on a different technical threshold. So I think it's quite healthy to have the differing opinions, because it means that this committee can start triangulating the views that are coming out. And as we move towards the sign off of the annual governance statement, we can take issues into account, and you can then assess whether the annual governance statement is an accurate reflection. I'm also mindful Alison has not been appointed for very long. And I think it would be unfair for her to comment on areas which she doesn't have specific experience or technical knowledge of, purely by virtue of not being in the post.
But I guess the point is more that it wouldn't be unreasonable for the annual governance statement to reflect something like this, but it may yet do so.
So the annual governance statement is a living document, and it's under constant review by the corporate governance group, which is a collection of senior officers, all with responsibility for internal controls. And there is a legal requirement for the annual governance statement to be submitted as part of the draft statement of accounts. So it's very high level at this moment in time. I do expect it to change. I do expect it to reflect more, especially as Maria takes up her new appointment as well, that will potentially change attitudes towards governance and culture of the council as well. And so we do need to look at that. So the annual governance statement is not necessarily limited to a cut-off point of 31st of March. Actually, it's a living document until it's signed. And so I'm open to it being reflected, and I think don't read too much into it at this stage.
Councillor Moser.
Yeah. But I'm looking at actually page 403 and table 1. And you've got a left line right up to the ratings there, and I'm just surprised to see the children, number 1 children, provision is limited. And if you read the limited, it says that this is not well presented or well managed. Can you just let me know about this, please?
Thank you.
Talk about it's the table to the internal.
Page 403. No, I've got a summary.
I think I'm going to have to come back on that.
Will you revert in writing?
No, I can see the table 2. You asked me how much that scope of the audit or why it's limited when now.
That's right. It's not just children. It's quite a few days more concerned because they are not well managed, or not well presented. We did environment and sustainable transport.
Yes.
Maria.
Can I just make a suggestion? So the member's right, picked up on the business assurance. That was the outcome of the internal audit. But if you go back to the previous report that we were looking at, Children's Service doesn't have any high risk recommendations outstanding. Now, it's not, I don't have the full records in front of me to say to you, they may have already rectified the position in terms of their follow-ups. So I think the outstanding high risk recommendations that were in the previous report need to be correlated with the list that you'll see in front of you. And I would expect to see assurance ratings vary, but if the recommendation is not implemented, then that's for me a double concern. And you had the limited assurance, but then they didn't implement those recommendations. In this case, I can't see a children's service one outstanding, which means that they have addressed any high risk recommendation. And Alison can report back if they've addressed all the recommendations that have come in that audit, because that's not visible to us today.
So we'll
Then time scale when you can actually bring this to the green level, then time scale from the.
It's agreed at the point of publishing the report with the lead officers and the auditors. So if it's if there's a reason why it's going to take 6 months, obviously it's not an arbitrary 5, 3, whatever. It's not like that. It's based on the circumstances, because it could be a system implementation required to rectify the risk. And if we're really looking at implementation, that takes some time. So if it's a really simple one, we'd like to think it'd be quite quickly. So no, there isn't a standard highs 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever like that. It's based on the circumstances and the professional of the audit and the service lead and their capacity.
Thank you very much. We're going to Councillor Morris, and then Alexa's going to have the last question. Is it a build? You can take the build.
Just to answer your first question, I think as members, there needs to be a bit clearer on the purpose of audit committee in terms of it's not about outcome as much as us assuring ourselves that the appropriate arrangements are in place organisationally to be sure that those outcomes can be achieved. So we need to not focus as much on this is what the outcome of this assurance that this audit has been. So in that case, it was indicating factors limiting like the service delivery of children, right? What you need to provide assurance on is that was identified as an issue and that was an assurance opinion. So the organisation has done its job in terms of telling us we found this issue, here's a limited assurance opinion.
Thank you.
Taken to audit committee.
That's helpful. Thank you very much. Councillor Morris for the final question on this item, please.
So what key factors do you think are preventing the council from going from limited assurance to reasonable assurance? And I guess you can, take your question.
Thank you. I think implementation of outstanding high risk audit recommendations, because some never look at outstanding. And that's not acceptable to me or Maria or the colleagues. So that is actually number one. But as you say, we're in a constant cycle. Implementation of more audits. So what we're looking for is I don't want to see high risk audit recommendation outstanding for just past their due date. I don't want any outstanding. That's the position we need to be in to give high level assurance and engagement in the reporting of that. We're looking to implement a sort of performance dashboard to go to CLB, so we're looking for client information, because to be honest, the information is in the spreadsheet, not one currently, so we need to improve that as well. So visibility and with those extra, that needs to be shown that visibility of the risks are improved, and also the implementation of the work we're doing with risk management. Again, Ash's only been in place for 5 months. This is very new for Newham to look and assess risk, and it is really important that we look at different risks. We can't predict every risk, can't mitigate every risk, but the development of that framework and the engagement, he's getting really big engagement with the transaction. So once that's embedded, and we are going to go through, because of the number of audits we're going to complete this year and our ambition around areas that haven't been looked at for quite some time, we are expecting a high number of recommendations to be delivered this year. So we do need to be mindful of that. There is a capacity issue. We are, everyone is working really hard with the university, so we have to, and my job there is to make sure the implementation dates are accurate and reasonable and reflected. I don't want to put everyone under, you've got to do it 2 months and then be late.
Yeah.
That's not helpful for anyone, and that's not giving effective management information to you as assurance.
Right.
So they're the 2 main areas: is high risk recommendations, particularly not being overdue, and clear this backlog we're in, embeddedness of the risk strategy and engagement in quality risk.
Thank you very much. So with that said, members are asked to note the report this evening. So may I see by a show of hands, are the recommendations noted? Yes, they are noted. Thank you very much. Item 14 is the Q1, the first quarter's counter fraud progress report 26-27 and the counter fraud team annual report 25-26. This being a new committee membership, please be aware that anything contained within the report or the work carried out by the counter fraud team, which is related to criminal and or ongoing investigations, cannot be disclosed until they are concluded. And this committee is not the appropriate forum to discuss individual matters, individual investigations or cases. And the purpose of this is to just share the progress and the results of the work that is undertaken by the team. So we have 10 minutes on this report, and I'll invite Nick to give a very abridged summary of the importance of this report.
So my name's Sharp, was not reasonable, but so thank you, Chair. The quarter one update progress report will be stand which we bring in and this is highlighted to really show the work we've done today on anything mentioned. This is somewhere around also got the annual report from 25-26. So from my point of view, the recent work that the team's undertaken and the results of improving year from year. So, for example, if you look within the house, that's within the last 4 years, continue to improve. So it's not that.
Any questions from members on this item? Councillor Doy?
On page 3 about the prospect of investigation about collective asset, was the mistake about discounting the part of the council, or was it that the residents actually looking for?
So all of the information we've contained will in these reports are identified something.
Any further questions or?
Is there any learning for us? Like, is there anything we could do to present it to you? Are you being too lax?
So what I would say is, I mean, with all of the frauds, you're never going to fix safety at all fraud. I don't think it's best to prevent as much as we can. And when we do find frauds, obviously we do look at how they might have occurred. That happens. We give recommendations to improvements that might be able to be made. We also work hand in hand with the internal audit team. So there's a lot of crossover there. Essentially, what internal audits, so if we find things we might recommend into internal audit to carry out audit. So that's not how we.
I'll come to Maria for a build before back to you.
Through you, Chair, we take the zero tolerance approach to fraud in the organisation. All staff have mandated training for anti-corruption, and all members need to undertake that training. So you will have received training as part of the induction programme. There will be more training that's rolled out. It's important that we have, we had agreed at Audit and Governance and then Cabinet anti-fraud and corruption strategy and policies, including a new whistleblowing policy, renamed the whistleblowing policy so that everyone understands what it means. It's not for the individual to figure out, or the member of staff to figure out whether it is or it isn't fraud. If something suspicious is happening, you report it straight to the next team. It's the next team's job to investigate and identify whether it's sloppy practice and we need to strengthen it, or whether it's actually fraud and they need to investigate it. It's not for anybody else in the organisation to do that. It just goes straight into his team. So it's about raising awareness. It's about raising awareness that people could be working together. You don't tell your manager, you go straight into the fraud team. And that's exactly the practice that we want. And by strengthening the internal control environment from the previous report, we can prevent fraud taking place in our organisation.
You can have a final.
Because what I'm trying to work out, it says over 900 accounts are involved in this, just in this year alone. So I'm trying to work out, like, is that a good thing? Like, we managed to catch 900 accounts, or is that a bad thing where it's like it's happening so much in new and like we're just so easy? It's so easy to propose to happen. I can't work out which one.
It's a very interesting way of looking at it. The better we get at detection, the more we find. And that doesn't mean, so as Nick said, these things happen everywhere. Our job is to minimise the opportunity for fraud to take place in every way that we operate. The internal control environment, our systems and processes, to how we engage with residents. And that means checks and balances must be in place all the time, including backward-looking checks, which is what Nick's been doing. Do these all stack up? And there's data matching, there's all sorts of things in these reports that take place. So it's a difficult one. I can't answer it one way or the other. But I'm glad that Nick's team has found this and we have rectified the position.
Great, thank you. We're going to come to Councillor Courtang for the final question on the item.
When we say 900 accounts, how does that compare to other boroughs? Obviously, you have to think about it in proportion to the size, but I guess that would maybe also help to contextualise the question.
Yeah, I mean, when there are sort of borough-wide benchmarking setbacks and that, I think it's also not miles from what it is. Well, it differently. So, for example, take rights to life, for example, some rights might think that rights to life is so we will partake in benchmarking the other factors. But yeah, it's not always that.
Thank you very much. So members this evening are asked to note the contents of the report. May I see by show of hands, are the recommendations noted? They are noted. Thank you very much. The next item was covered earlier on in the evening, which was item 15, which means we're then moving on to item 16, which is Q4, the Q4 report of contract waivers. I'm allocating 5 minutes to this and I'm going to take it as read, so I'm going to go straight to questions. I'll allow you a moment to find it.
It's not so much a question. I just want to say that I was previously on the audit committee maybe like two years ago, and at that point in time we were seeing many quarterly waivers every time. It's something we complain about every meeting. So obviously new members won't necessarily know that this represents substantial progress on behalf of the council.
Thank you.
I just wanted to know that.
Good build.
That is quite impressive. So thank you.
Thanks for that intervention. Therefore, I'm going to ask members this evening to note the summary of the waivers for the first quarter of this year. So may I see by show of hands, are the recommendations noted? They are noted. Thank you very much. We're then moving on to item 17, which is the year ahead's forward plan. In addition to the training that's mentioned in the forward plan, officers will be emailing around after the meeting to ask for any other specific training requirements that might be helpful. I'm taking this report as read. I'm allocating 5 minutes to the item. Are there any questions on the report? Councillor Higgins.
I just wanted to say I'm concerned about the decision to cancel the June meeting, and I'd like to know a little bit more about why that decision was taken. It's been mentioned that the draft statement of accounts weren't ready, but there were other items on that agenda, and we've had an incredibly long meeting today with very compressed agenda items, and that and for that being many members here first meeting, it makes me concerned about just the level of depth of detail that we do into things. And so I don't understand why that decision was taken. I'm unhappy about that. Separately, I've emailed about this and just letting the committee know. I think it's a problem that we don't currently have a plan to review the any recommended changes to the constitution ahead of the October full council meeting, because we're not currently due to meet until after that. And ideally, October would have a chance to approve those changes, given that we now have responsible for reviewing any recommended changes. I think we probably will need an additional meeting to consider those changes at some point. And I would, sorry it's getting late, would appreciate a response on that point.
I'm not going to come to officers for this. To your first point around the June meeting, from my recollection, the draft statement of accounts were not available, and it was discussed with myself and officers that we could roll that into the meeting, which was in very short time period following it. And that was what the decision that we took at the time. And in terms of the September, so in terms of the cancellation of the June meeting, we felt we could combine them, but it's noted. And we'll work to get better at that. I think now that we have new officers in place, and now that we have a forward view of the reports that we need to consider, now that we're looking to implement the sessions beforehand to give the proper time to discuss them, that depth will come with it. To the point of the late finish noted, I've only been in post since January. All meetings have run on till 10 o'clock. It's my understanding that that is the nature of the Audit and Governance Committee, given the annual calendar there. And as was discussed earlier, we are looking at adding a meeting in September to your latter point, and that will come later in proceedings or by email. Councillor Morris, very briefly, and then I'm moving on.
Thank you, Chair. So, to support Councillor Higgins' point, my first meeting here seems to suggest there's a lot of emphasis and trust placed in audits committee in terms of its governance of council. I felt as if the specific times allocated to specific items was not significant enough to actually vet those items. I don't necessarily really the time of the meetings because we have the times that we do, but I would rather have more meetings to look at specific items in depth, especially given the governance conversations we've had with others, of specific meetings and try to address as many items as possible.
Sure. Point is noted. I'll revert to you in writing and I'll speak to the officers. And my instant take, because I want to give you a response in a moment, is so many of the matters here are for noting. It's, are we assured in the checks and balances that are in place? But it is noted, and I'll speak to the officers and come back to you in writing. With any further questions on the report? No. Therefore,
I did actually, I did have one. I just remembered. I can't remember which year this was. It might have been the 2024 budget setting process, but there was a recommendation accepted from budget scrutiny to bring forward the savings delivery at whether it was quarterly or twice a year or something like that to audit committee, because there was a particular concern about audit about savings delivery performance.
Yeah.
I'm just interested that that's not on there.
Maria, for a brief interjection, please.
So I would say that's the role of scrutiny, the role of audit and governance. It's staying scrutiny because it's that obviously. However, financial sustainability audits that are going to take place will tell you whether we're on track in terms of savings.
So they're going to scrutiny instead.
The quarterly budgetary monitoring reports will go there, and scrutiny committees can have a choice as to whether they want to delve further into specific areas and specific savings.
Great. So may I see by show of hands as the report noted this evening? The report is noted. We're moving on to item 18, which is the date of the next meeting. So the date of the next meeting is scheduled for the 4th of November, 2026 at Newham Town Hall. However, as we've discussed this evening, an additional meeting is going to be scheduled for late September or the very beginning of October. And once we've aligned diaries, we'll send that out to members. Item 19. So the committee is advised to pass a resolution to exclude the press and public from the meeting from this point onwards in order to discuss the exempt minutes. So may I please have a proposer and a seconder for this resolution? Proposer, seconder, thank you very much. So may I see by show of hands as the full committee resolved to exclude the press and public? Thank you. Yes, okay. So before we go into the exempt session, that concludes part 1 of tonight's business. I'd like to wish good night to everyone who was watching on YouTube. Bye, Mum. Members, please wait for the clerk to verbally confirm that the live stream has ended before we move to the exempt item.